So I will spend just a few words on this and on my father before giving space to Professor Pier Luigi Luisi, who will give the introductory lecture. So my father was a geneticist. He was lucky enough and brave enough to contribute to the birth of genetics starting in the 60s. But in parallel to his experimental work on genetics, he has always asked himself very general and basic questions about the origin of life and about the peculiarity of living systems. And that's why, so with this idea, he always had a, I take a word from Luisi, a systemic approach, in which he thought that in order to investigate living systems, we also needed mathematical modeling and physics. And that's why he has always been fascinated by the explaining power of mathematics and physics to investigate the living systems. And this is also why he was one of the first promoters of interdisciplinary meetings in the late 80s when interdisciplinary work was really rare. So he was animating these Saturday morning meetings here in Pisa, the Department of Mathematics, which were informal and were the embryo of the Center for Interdepartmental Studies on Complex Systems, which is the one that hosts this conference today. Therefore, then my father passed away about 2 years and a half ago, and my mother had this wonderful idea to do something for his memory. And since he invested a lot on young people, on students, he was very keen on trying to give value on them and very optimistic about young students to pursue the work and do new work. So the idea was to promote this award to master thesis in interdisciplinary disciplines. This is why this work, this award is titled The Living State of Matter. The living state of matter is one idea he had because he said, okay, as in physics, it is very well known that we have very well-defined states of matter, liquid state, solid state. Let's investigate the living state of matter as well. So to do this, we couldn't be more happy to have Professor Luisi here to give the introductory lecture to the award, because Luisi, he studied at the Scuola Normale Superiore, and then he had a brilliant career as a chemist, but also as a theorist about the origins of life at ATH in particular. So he will give a lecture on the origins of life, which is really very, very close to what my father was thinking. And I'm sure that my father would be very happy to hear this lecture too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, it's a great privilege to be at the shadow, the great shadow of your father, and the presence of your mother. For this reason, my lecture will be a more general one than what we have been hearing until now on mechanical statistics. As you see from the title, La visione sistemica, and this title originates, let's see if I find it. From a book which I had the honor and the pleasure to write with Frigio Capra, a book which was for a while a bestseller in the States, where we were trying to explain the complexity of life in the various forms: the social life, the biochemical life, the ecological life, the medical life. And a book which was immediately and very well translated into Italian by the Epoca, It's looking. And the notion of system life corresponds to the notion of complexity. If you have a system which consists of many parts and you want to examine the property of the system, taking into account all the various parts, you have necessarily a systemic approach, and you have also at the same time complexity. A complex system is simply a system formed by many parts which in a way are interacting with each other. In a way, maybe different ways, and this characterizes the different type of systemic system. Now, let me say that today the sentence, the whole is more than the sum of the parts, is almost a kind of very common expression. And indeed, there is something very true in this. Let me, for this reason, say that for a couple of centuries, even more, particularly in our Western world, it was not so. The notion of whole was not at all present. We had that 200-300 years with two towering figures. One was Cartesio with his Rex Cogitant and Rex Extensia. And the other great figure was Isaac Newton. And the two together, philosophy from one hand and science from the other, were really shaping our history of science, till the end of last century. And actually, this was the so-called mechanistic view of the world, and which characterized the Western world with this sharp division between body and mind, and philosophy and humanities, matter and anima, the two extremes. This kind of division, which is not present, for example, in the Indian or Buddhist world, and which instead characterize the sharp division, body-mind, which has characterized our life for so many years. And it was only the beginning of the last century that a strange phenomenon took place, that a series of quite independent authors, very few, very famous ones, like von Neumann, Gregory Bateson, Heinz von Förster, Alan Turing, etc., began to attack this kind of mechanistic approach, saying that this was quite unable to describe the most important property of all, which is life. And the assumption, the argument was very simple. You know, take a butterfly, which is composed by many parts, the wings and the antenna and the eyes and the gelatinous body, and ask the question, how do all different parts know that they belong to the same unity? A very simple, naive question, which, however, destroyed the mechanistic view, and no, indietro. Sì. Okay. Let me give you some more example of this systemic approach, showing a figure which we all know. And to simplify even further, let me show the organs of our body, with the liver, the intestine, the kidneys, the brain. And you see in this picture a lot of errors, which are not due to the fantasy of the friend painter, artist who made this slide for me. But these errors are indeed the physiological property, as the intestine cannot do anything without the contact, without interaction with the stomach, or without the interaction with the liver and the kidneys. You see that all these organs are, in a way, not in a way, are really in contact with each other. It is like an orchestra where the different players must be in tune with each other in order to compose a general harmony. And this kind of picture can be extended, instead of this organ, can be, for example, the countries of the European Union, or could be the different parts of the constitution of an hospital. Each time you have complexity, you have this kind of interaction, which can be of different nature. Then, quello prima ancora prima. Andiamo. Then, with time, all these bonds my computer is much better. Okay, see. With time, all these bonds begin to break down, and there is a certain point which we call death, where the organs are still there, maybe are still functioning for a few minutes, few hours, but they are not talking anymore with each other. That is the picture of fragmentation, and see, and I was saying that this kind of interaction is characteristic of many systems. Let's go immediately and very quickly to a very cogent, brutto as a computer, where we see the modern world, where we have the pollution, which is responsible for the increase of temperature, which is responsible for the major climatic catastrophe. And this pollution, of course, is caused by our extreme consumption of energy, which is caused by mostly by multinational, which want more and more energy, more and more selling property, and this causes poverty. Poverty brings about the problem of migration, and you see how in the world all can be correlated to each other, and you see also that yes, you can look at pollution, try to mitigate pollution of a big city, but it's clear this is never the solution to consider only one property. You have to think that pollution is also correlated to sickness, to health problem, and this is related to the traffic. And in a way, it comes about the point that all is related to every other things. And we come back to this important point in a few minutes. And we were asking before, talking about the whole, which is more than the sum of the parts. And let's see this point, taking into account the simplest possible living system, which is a cell, for example. And if you look inside with the lens of a biochemist, you see this picture, which is really appalling in its complexity, as each point is a chemical compound, each line is a chemical reaction going from one compound to the other. And here you can ask the question, where is life of this cell localized? Is there a point, a center of reaction which dominates the whole picture? And the answer, of course, is that life cannot be localized. Cellular life is a global distributed quality. It's not due to any particular center, but this is not true simply of the cell. If you look at me and you say, where is life of Mr. Luisi localized? Of course, the answer is Mr. Luisi is his own body, plus all the emotion, plus all his career, all the remembrances of his infancy, and in many things together, where the notion of center disappear completely, to leave instead the notion of the whole network of existence. If I could go back, I don't dare. You see, the life of a cell is really the entire body of reactions. And the same is true for any other object. So life cannot be localized. Life is really belonging to the whole system. And this is also seen as the holistic view, where holistic means togetherness. The whole aspect of life are together, so that the various parts of life of a cell, but of Mr. Luisi, cannot be considered as isolated part, or you can, but then this isolated part can never give you the whole picture of life. And if you keep going, now this permits me a small philosophical digression, which, however, is correlated very much to this very meeting. This man you see is a monk who lived in the 2nd century of our area. Mr. Nagarjuna is a Buddhist monk and is the one who invented the notion of emptiness. In Italian it's called vacuity, but emptiness gives a better idea of this phenomena. He asked the following question: is there anything in our world, even in our mind, which has an intrinsic validity, namely, which in order to exist does not need to depend on other subject? So again, the question, is there anything which has an intrinsic existence? And he found out that whatever he was considering was always dependent from another things. The chair dependent on the wood, the wood is also dependent on the carpenter. And if you go in this way, you find with him that the real nature of all things is emptiness, the incapability of exist by themselves, as an autonomous entity. Because then, as Mr. Lord Buddha was saying 7th century before him, there is this because there is that. And that is here because of the other one. In other words, all what is present in our world, even in our mental world, is made of relations. All depends from all other things. And you know, this is a very important I was saying also because of our meeting, this causality, there is this because there is that, is a central pillar of philosophical Buddhism, but in all philosophy in general. And if you now consider this together with the notion that all parts are then correlated with each other, at the same time, this picture of the world is not a static one, because each part decays, each part is impermanent. So you have the picture of complexity where everything depends on the other things, but at the same time is a dynamic picture. And the sentence at the end of the slide, if all things are mutually linked and causal interdependent, then the entire universe is not made by isolated independent things, but is a dynamic, totally interactive process. Now, this was written by Nagarjuna almost 2000 years ago, but it's also what is represented by our system view of life. There is nothing which can stand by itself as an independent, intrinsic, autonomous object. Then we arrive at the wall as a gigantic dynamic network. And this is each living system, but is also all systems together because each one is related with the other. I want to spend the last 2 minutes of this presentation, because I am at the end, by going back to your father in a way, asking the question, you know, this system view of the world according to which you have to consider the interaction of all these different aspects. How can we bring these to the consciousness, particularly of the young people, so that they can acquire a better consciousness of what is reality? And let me say that we have been doing that with an example, which is so-called the Cortona Week, for which I have the last 3 slides or so. This is the monastery where we were assembling from 1985. This conference, which consists of a mixture of students with older teachers, but teachers are from all disciplines, from physics, from philosophy, from spirituality, with the principle that you should not consider only one discipline at a time, but what is important is the confluence, the interaction of all the different disciplines with each other. And some teacher, for many of you may know Francisco Varela. There is a workshop if you want to learn how to drums, or if you want to do some carpenter work. Those are all outside in the afternoon, in the morning their lecture. And let me end with a series of questions which are related to life, but in particular to the relation which for many people is very important, the relation between science and spirituality, not to be confused with religion. Spirituality is the basis of religion, is looking up, trying to transcend the simplicity of human nature. But these questions are the ones who were discussed and are still discussed now. Who is the final judge of reality? Science or spirituality? Do we need spirituality to give a meaning to life? That's a good question, and not an easy one. And will spiritual insight be critical to future science? And then there are the mystery of the order in nature. Is the order invented by our mind, or is it there to stand with? And give your own answer and come to the Cortona week. The next one is in July 16 to 23, and I believe this would be complete in keeping with Professor Buiatti's view of the young people looking for a new vision of life. Thank you very much. I have some dépliant of the Cortona week. Take them.